All right, well, here we go. We're going to do another NFC West draft roundtable. I'm joined by Stu Jackson from the Rams, Kiana Martin from the 49ers, and Mike Jurecki from the Arizona Cardinals. We're here to break down a little bit of what's happened in the offseason so far, talk about the upcoming draft, what all four teams might be looking to do. And I mean, we got to start it off. The two biggest questions I think on everyone's mind when it comes to the NFC West is what are the 49ers doing with that third pick? And is Stu going to be at the Malibu Beach House? So I think we'll let Kiana start out and talk to us a little bit about what the 49ers might be thinking at 3.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about that Malibu Beach House because that looks like a great place to be on draft day. I think all of us here on this call know how crazy draft weekend can be. So that's not a bad place. But as for the 49ers, I like to think that they can have their way in a sense with that number 3 overall pick outside of what's going to happen with the Jaguars and the Jets. They kind of have free reign. So now it's evaluating which is that quarterback, which we're assuming if you're going to give up that much draft capital, it's likely going to be a quarterback that you move up to number 3 overall for. But which quarterback best fits what the 49ers want to do going forward? They haven't selected a quarterback in the first round since Alex Smith. So it's been a while. And also Kyle Shanahan hasn't really had that opportunity to hand pick his guy. If you look at his history, dating back to, Cleveland and Atlanta, and even here getting Jimmy Garoppolo. So now it's his opportunity to have his hand on who he wants to lead this organization to the future. So it's going to be interesting. There's still a lot of questions. I know there's a lot of rumors going around, but still waiting to see till April 29th to see who that number 3 overall pick will be.
And I think people usually assume, a top pick, if it's a quarterback, he's the guy starting right away, but that won't necessarily be the case from what we're hearing, right?
Yeah, from what we're hearing, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan they've stood on the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback for 2021, which can work for the team's benefit. You have a young guy coming in. Everybody knows Kyle Shanahan's offense. It's not the easiest. It's a pretty complex offense. So giving this rookie an opportunity to sit under Jimmy for a year or so, not sure, but the opportunity to do that and groom him and help develop him into the NFL will certainly be beneficial to his future with the team. But as of now, Jimmy Garoppolo is with the 49ers in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, just based on reports, just your opinion, do you think who makes the most sense based on their offense and obviously Kyle Shanahan?
Yeah, honestly, looking at everything out on paper, who makes the most sense to me? I'm going to go with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I say this because you look at this team's win total when Jimmy's on the field compared to when he's off the field. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's like 24-7 compared to like 7-20 when he's not on the field. This team, they love this guy. They rally around this guy. They want to play for this guy. I think if you have a situation like that, you definitely ride with that and you keep Jimmy Garoppolo under center.
Now, Stu, we joke about the beach house, but what kind of led to the team making that decision to go off-site, get together in a definitely unique setting?
Yeah, it's just a chance to do something different, and it's a unique experience for draft weekend. So it's it still blows my mind that it's something that even came together and formulated, but. I'm excited about it. It's a unique opportunity, one that I'm sure the rest of the organization is really looking forward to as well.
Did you get the invite?
You guys don't have a ton of draft picks early on, so we're going to see Les and Sean Lane at the pool, or are they going to be focusing on the next rounds?
Yeah, well, the war room will be there, but I don't know if they'll be spending too much time in the pool necessarily. But you're right; it's another year where the Rams are here. We are waiting around until late in the second round for their first selection. So be interesting to see how they plan to use that time and finish up on any last minute remaining prep they have. Here, barring any unforeseen trades, I suppose, back or ahead.
Mike, the Cardinals, they've found their quarterback. Obviously, they've loaded up a lot of weapons on defense. When you look at kind of how this roster is constructed and draft needs, what do you see making sense for the Cardinals early on in the draft?
Well, I think what happened last year when they were 5-2 and 6-3, and then I go back to the Week 16 game against the Niners and C.J. Beathard. The Cardinals, they got beat at the line of scrimmage, and then you go to week 17, they're facing a backup quarterback. They got beat there. They put in Chris Streveler, so they bring in Colt McCoy. He has some experience, but they went a little bit different this offseason, and I think they wanted to add leadership and physicality. And by going out and making a trade for Rodney Hudson, probably one of the best centers in football. I mean, he hasn't given up a ton of sacks, and that was an issue with Mason Cole last year. And then they go out and get J.J. Watt. You know, and I feel like, you know, the situation was he just needed a fresh start, and there was a lot of teams interested. They're expecting big things from him. He's missed 32 games in the last 5 years, but he was double-teamed almost 36% last year, so I don't think he's going to see that. And then going out and getting A.J. Green, you know, another guy that, you know, was frustrated with 3 different quarterbacks last year in Cincinnati. You could see the frustration on some of the route running, but the Cardinals feel like if he can line up opposite of DeAndre Hopkins and they figure out the slot position, that they feel like he's still a good 50-50 ball guy. He runs good routes. I don't know if he's going to have 45 or 50 catches. So these guys are all over 30 years old. And then most recently, they went after and got James Conner, and I think running back would have been an option in the draft, but now they got him and Chase Edmonds. Again, he spent 8 years at the University of Pittsburgh and with the Steelers. The running backs coach, James Saxon, was with him in 2018. He put up close to 1,500 yards, made the Pro Bowl, so some familiarity there. And the whole thing is as you guys know, with Jared Goff's rookie contract and Russell Wilson, the Cardinals need to cash in now. And they went from 5 wins to 8 wins, but I do think we're seeing a little bit of a different philosophy when it comes to the offensive staff. Sean Kugler, who's been the the offensive line coach, is now the offensive coordinator. Cam Turner is now the quarterback's coach. So Kingsbury's still the play caller, but I think they want to be more physical at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. So again, 8 wins is not enough, and this team they should have won 10 games last year. I thought the front office put a 10-win team together, but it didn't happen. Disappointment going into the offseason.
Mike, go ahead, Kiana.
No, you were just listing off all of these free agent acquisitions and what's been brought to this team this offseason. But in your mind, which one stands out to you most? Which one was that home run for your squad?
Well, I think Hudson, just because, going against the NFC West and, the defensive tackles in this division, they were getting pushed around. But I think the signing that I really like was Malcolm Butler, because another guy that played a ton of snaps, him and Jeffrey Simmons were their best players last year. He had 100 tackles, and people are going to go, well, they didn't get a pass rush. They were 31st in sacks. They had 19, and so he made a lot of tackles. But Malcolm Butler will settle things down now that Patrick Peterson's gone to Minnesota. Robert Alford hasn't been able to stay healthy. Byron Murphy. So I think Hudson's the biggest addition. Nothing against J.J. Watt. I want to see him do it on a consistent basis, stay healthy. But adding Malcolm Butler gives the Cardinals a little flexibility in the draft. John, it's your turn.
Bring it on. What do you got for me?
Okay, so I got to remind everyone, the Seahawks were 12-4 last year.
Well, thank you. But I think sometimes
because that gets misled. And Russell Wilson, he was an MVP to start the season. Obviously, when we got a chance to play him, it was a great game. That was a big win for the Cardinals. And then, let Russ cook, and then he makes his comments. And I never thought he would be traded with that $39 million cap hit. So can this be repaired at least for this season?
I would think so. I mean, we haven't heard from Russell Wilson yet, but everything we're seeing on social media, he seems genuinely fired up about the moves they're making. Some of the guys we've talked to, Chris Carson, Carlos Dunlap, who were free agents, said, they talked to Russell Wilson. He was talking to them about coming back and kind of recruiting them. So, yeah, I mean, we all saw what was out there and heard the reports and the rumors, and we'll see where it all ends up. But to me, it seems like winning, like always, winning can cure a lot of things. And if this team can just get over that hump from having not just a good regular season, but going back to being a team contending for Super Bowls, I think that'll make everybody pretty happy. And then you talked about a trade with the Raiders to add offensive line help. The Seahawks did that as well, adding Gabe Jackson at guard. And, as we all know with the NFC West interior line play, thanks to a certain number 99 in Los Angeles, is crucial. So I think beefing up the line a little bit will certainly help keep people happy as well.
And what about the weapons on the outside? I mean, we know that Metcalf and Lockett have put up numbers. Do you think they still want to spin it down the field?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, probably one of the biggest question marks that we really won't know the answer to until the regular season is what this offense is going to look like with the new coordinator, Shane Waldron, coming over from the Rams. We all assume there's going to be elements of a Sean McVay offense, but Waldron's never really been a play caller, so we don't know yet what that's going to look like. That being said, when you have a quarterback who does the things Russell Wilson does, you have the weapons like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I don't think throwing the ball downfield goes away from your game. It just might be what other wrinkles do they add, which brings me to Stu. What can you tell us about Shane Waldron, and what can Seahawks fans expect to get out of their new coordinator?
Yeah, during his time with the Rams, he held the role of pass game coordinator at one point, and before Kevin O'Connell came in, worked closely with the quarterbacks as well. So he's someone that's highly regarded and well regarded by the Rams offensive staff and really everyone in the building. So I think Russell Wilson's really going to enjoy working with him. And of course, I know the Seahawks also signed Gerald Everett in free agency too. So you have that connection there. I think, Shane will figure out a way to have Gerald have an impact on that offense and be somebody that Russell can trust in the passing game as well.
Let's not bury the lead, Stu. I mean, Matthew Stafford, that could be one of the best acquisitions in the offseason. I mean, nothing against Jared Goff, but to me, the deep ball, the fact that Sean won't have to feed him the plays. I mean, how excited were they to pull off that trade?
Yeah, I think that's been the word that Sean has used almost ad nauseum, is just excitement and being, thrilled to have him. Stafford's somebody that can attack all three levels of the field. His ability to manipulate coverage and just being able to hit guys, especially on some of those vertical routes and deeper routes too. Just all those different kinds of things he brings is something that Sean McVay feels like can really help this offense and take it to another level here this upcoming season. Once they found out that they had the chance to go out and get Stafford, it was something that they moved relatively quickly to put together and make an offer and try to bring him out to Los Angeles.
Mike, you touched on it at the beginning, but the idea of winning in that rookie quarterback window, you rattle off a lot of moves. Does it feel like there's really that understanding and urgency in the building of, hey, we got to strike while we have this opportunity and cash in on having the quarterback relatively cheap?
Yeah, but Kyler's got to put the work in. I mean, I think he's athletic enough and dynamic enough to go 8-8 every year, but can he win 10 or 11 games? I mean, they cut down the sacks the first season 48 to 23. They had 22 rushing touchdowns. Kenyon Drake had 10. He had 11. So he says he wants to sit in the pocket and make the throws, but I think when things break down, any young quarterback has a tendency to get outside the pocket. So I think it's more film study. Maybe Colt McCoy will help him a little bit. Just the fact that he's been in a lot of different systems. They had Brett Hundley here, but he was the third string quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's on that way to get that long-term deal, but I want to see more consistency from him. Again, athleticism gets you only for so far. I look what Josh Allen's doing with Brian Dable. I look with Baker Mayfield now with Kevin Stefanski. They've taken that next step, and that's the Cardinals are hoping for from Kyler Murray. All right, let's talk about the Niners, because I was listening to the NFL Network, and Mike Silver, who I know has connections to the Niners, he says they're the best team in the NFC, not only the West, and I hope he knows that the Buccaneers, which he does, have all 22 returning starters. You guys are decimated with injuries last year. I mean, what are the expectations? We talked about Seattle going 12-4. It seemed like they make the playoffs every year with Russell Wilson. Same with the Rams. What are the expectations now where they feel like they're ready to compete now, like they did a couple of years ago going to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think we're all aware that Super Bowl window, I think it closes quicker than it opens. So this team has to strike while the iron is hot. And they felt like that iron was hot last year, but injuries told a completely different story. Now, because of that, they still were able to retain a lot of those key veterans this offseason in free agency, Trent Williams being one of the biggest. A lot of those guys on defense, their fullback Kyle Juszczyk. And then not just that, being able to keep those guys, but it also comes to getting some of those guys back from injury, namely Nick Bosa, a guy who's currently going through rehab and has been posting on his social media channels, making it appear that he hopes to be ready sometime in the near future. But I think it's a lot of just looking at some of those pieces that are coming back that were there for that Super Bowl run. You still have George Kittle, another year of having a guy like him, and then adding in some of those younger pieces like your Deebo Samuel, your Brandon Ayuk, and furthering developing them another year in Kyle Shanahan's system. So I think a lot of the expectations is just that this team was only a season removed from being at the Super Bowl. Obviously, injuries derailed their revenge tour of 2020, but bringing back some of those pieces and also upgrading at others, looking at, again, Trent Williams, adding in center Alex Mack, being able to do that. I think that's where a lot of that expectation come from. And the team still feels that they are still, that window is still open for them. So they definitely are trying to strike now.
Now, Kiana, two of the Seahawks free agent additions this offseason to the defense came from the 49ers. So tell the Seahawks fans listening what they can expect out of Ahkello Witherspoon and Carrie Hyder Jr.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Carrie Hyder because he's one of my favorite stories to talk about. Going back to last offseason, he didn't expect to really have the role that he had with the 49ers. You know, he knew that he was going to be a depth piece. You know, you had your Nick Bosa, you know, you had your D Ford. They know that the 49ers like to rotate defensive linemen, and he was fine with that. And then look, by week 2 of the season, this guy is now pushed into a starting role. And he said he didn't expect that, but he was so excited that the team took a chance on him and trusted him to be able to take that role. And he led the team with 8.5 sacks last year, was phenomenal. I know the team wishes they could have him back, but you guys will definitely enjoy having a guy like Carrie Hyder, a hard worker. And I know when he said he wanted to hit free agency, he was like, I want to know my worth. He's like, I finally got to put it all on tape. I didn't really have that opportunity at my other stops. And he did that. And he definitely was rewarded with Seattle. So definitely excited for Carrie Hyder. And then Ahkello Witherspoon came in. I know he was switched in and out of the lineup throughout his career with the 49ers, but this is a guy that one of my favorite stories. I know I just talked about Carrie being a favorite story, but this is one of my other favorite stories. When he was pulled out of the lineup, I believe it might have been that game against the Seahawks. And I believe Emmanuel Mosley was put in his place. Ahkello went to the sideline and talked to the special teams coach like, hey, what can I do to get out there and help you guys on special teams? I understand that you guys might not need me at corner right now, but I want to help however I can. And that just says a lot about his character. And then not to mention, he's one of the brightest guys in the locker room. I promise you. Even I asked him, is a hot dog a sandwich? And that gave me he gave me the most eloquent answer to that. But just a smart guy, a hard worker, and he'll certainly be missed. But you guys will definitely love having a guy like Ahkello.
Great. Looking forward to talking about those guys.
Don't forget to ask about the hot dog being a sandwich.
I'm going to do that. That's a hot debate.
Hey, Stu, let me ask you this. Cam Akers, is he going to be the bell cow?
Well, when you look at the numbers, Mike, over the final, 8 games plus the playoffs, I mean, he really seemed to take a hold of the lead running back role. So all signs certainly point to that. He has the talent, obviously, to do that. Ended up being the leading rusher despite missing a few games due to injury by a yard over Darrell Henderson. Akers had 625 yards, Henderson 624. So the two of them together make a really great tandem, but I think Sean McVay has kind of hinted at, Akers is a guy who can handle that every down role, and he's somebody that I think McVay certainly trusts to be that bell cow running back, so to speak.
And that just goes to show you don't have to take a running back in the first round.
That's right. Yeah, they were able to get him in the second round.
No, Gurley was a good pick, but clearly it didn't pan out towards the end.
Seahawks just re-signed their starting running back, who was a 7th rounder. So you can find running backs all over the place.
Let me ask you, John, what's the ceiling on Chris Carson? Is he a guy who could put up 1,500 yards?
He only had the one serious injury that ended his rookie season, but he's yet to get that full 16 game healthy all year. But yeah, I mean, he had 1,200 yards in 14 games a couple of years ago. So, I think whether he's a 1,500 yard rusher would depend a lot on the offense. He's capable of that. I mean, we've seen the production, the 100-yard games and all that if you fed him the ball enough, I think he can do that if he holds up The bigger question is, how do they use him this year? And then how much do they integrate Rashad Penny now that he's healthy? We saw, if you go back to the end of 2019, before Penny tore his ACL, he really started coming on strong for about a 2 or 3 game stretch, and the workload was a little more balanced then. So, that might limit Carson's overall numbers a tiny bit, but would make the running game stronger overall if you have both those guys going.
John, I want to go back to you for a second. I know we were talking a little bit about Stu and, having to kind of sit and wait. You're kind of hurry up and waiting in the first round of the draft. But for you guys, 3 draft picks heading into 2021, how do you foresee the front office being able to maybe fill some of these holes, given the landscape of the draft?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Maybe day one, you just watch Jamal Adams highlights to feel good about it. But it's I don't know. I mean, knowing John Schneider, even when he goes into a draft with the standard 7 picks, he's likely to wheel and deal and try to add more. He definitely kind of subscribes to that theory of there's an element of, I don't want to say crapshoot, but the draft is hard. It's hard to nail it. So the more shots you give yourself, if you have 11 picks or whatever, you got more chances to hit on guys. So I can't imagine the Seahawks come out of this draft making 3 picks, whether that's moving back from 56, which is their first pick, and trying to get some more out of it, whether that's trading future picks, trading a player. I don't know how it happens, but I got to think they're going to draft more players than that. But they also have, done a pretty good job in free agency. They didn't have a lot of money to spend, but they've gotten creative with how they've done contracts. They've brought back some of their own guys, found some good value guys that I don't feel like they're going in this draft with a ton of major holes, but yeah, they're obviously very limited in their resources in the draft. And I think we'll see John Schneider try to pull some magic to get some more picks. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to maybe we've covered a lot of this, but maybe get each person to talk about what you think is the best move your team's made so far this offseason, and what is maybe the biggest need or question mark heading into the draft.
Yeah, I would say the biggest move was, I'd probably just go back to getting Stafford from the Lions. That was a huge trade all offseason long. Sean McVay has talked about wanting to create more explosive plays on offense, and that being a priority. When you acquire somebody with the arm talent that Stafford has, and like I mentioned before, just the success he has with connecting on those deep routes and deep balls, that's certainly one way to do it. And then in a close second, I'd probably say re-signing Leonard Floyd, not necessarily a new addition, but in the past they've kind of cycled through edge rushers, because when you have somebody like Aaron Donald, you can have a little bit more flexibility with who you put on the outsides and how you kind of build that pass rush. But they view him as more than just an edge rusher, and his versatility brings a lot to the defense. So that was another key move. But that being said, even though they brought back Floyd and who was arguably their best edge rusher last year, I still think that's a position that they could potentially address in the draft. They could also probably address the interior of the offensive line, just because starting center Austin Blythe signed with the Kansas City Chiefs during free agency. And so those are 2 positions that came up earlier in the this draft cycle, even before Floyd was re-signed, and even before Blythe departed. So they could potentially look to address the interior of the offensive line and edge rushers still, even in the draft, even with those that they brought back and still have on the roster at each of those respective positions.
How about the Niners, Kiana?
Yeah, I think for San Francisco, obviously it's protecting the quarterback and being able to retain a guy like Trent Williams that had a whole year off of football, comes back and he's back at all pro level. That's a guy that it's important. You have to pay somebody like that. Just what he brings to this team, to that offense. I think that was one of the biggest moves, also being able to grab Alex Mack. I mentioned that earlier because that was a position that was a big question mark for the 49ers following that injury to Weston Richburg. So I think those 2 are probably 2 of the biggest offseason moves for the 49ers. As far as needs going into the draft, thankfully they have the luxury that there aren't any massive voids or holes due to guys leaving this offseason. But I will say, a lot of people might not recognize, but although they have the talent on offense, wide receiver is a fairly thin position group for the 49ers. They've got Debo, they've got Brandon Ayuk. Beyond that, they brought in Mohamed Sanu, but there's not that much proven wide receiver talent on the roster. So I'm certain that they'll definitely be looking towards the draft to add some talent there, but also cornerback, Richard Sherman out the door. And they were able to retain Jason Verrett and Emmanuel Mosley, but also adding a little bit of depth there, I think will be really important. And, San Francisco prides themselves on their D line. There's still questions surrounding D Ford's availability in the future. So I'm sure they'll definitely look to add some pass rush talent off the edge. It's probably one of their top 3 needs heading into the draft.
Mike?
Well, I mentioned Rodney Hudson, and I think I think he's going to help Kyler Murray with the line calls. I think there's going to be an accountability factor there. Again, Mason Cole was a 3rd-round pick. He was getting pushed around. But I look at the draft, and they're picking 16th, and, 4 or 5 quarterbacks get pushed up on the board. Could see a couple tackles. I think Jalen Waddle could be in play, considering A.J. Green's on a 1-year deal. I know Patrick Surtain's probably not going to be there, but J.C. Horn, the Cardinals have a lot of interest in him. Again, you only have Malcolm Butler on a 1-year deal. Robert Alford hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then Vera Tucker. If the Cardinals feel like they Justin Pugh's getting a little long in the tooth. Calvin Beachum, right tackle, played all 16 games last year. Tucker's a guy that, they have some intel when Graham Harrell is the offensive coordinator. Cliff was there for about a month before he accepted the Cardinals job. So I think they'll say best available player, but I think there's got to be a need involved, considering you got A.J. Green on a 1-year deal, Malcolm Butler on a 1-year deal. And if they didn't sign James Conner, I think they would have considered a running back in the 2nd or 3rd round. You look at Jordan Hicks, inside linebacker, lined up next to Isaiah Simmons. They got to get some younger guy there that can go from sideline to sideline. And really, I think, Chandler Jones goes in his final year of his contract. They retain Marcus Golden. Dennis Gardeck tore his ACL. So, as you guys all pointed out, you can never have enough pass rushers. But I think they may try to trade down. We only have 6 picks. Cardinals have the 16th pick, 49, and then we don't have a pick for 111 players. So a lot of good players are going off the board. So can they trade down to get an extra 3? And then they got 2 7th-round picks early in the 7th round. So I anticipate they're going to try to wheel and deal. But if they have to make a pick at 16, I think wide receiver or corner would be an option.
Then I'll answer my own question. I think when looking at the moves so far, not really one player, but I really like what the Seahawks have done to keep the pass rush going. That was a big issue in 2019. And then to start 2020, it was a little slow. They bring in Carlos Dunlap, and Pete Carroll said at the end of the year they want to keep the pass rush intact, but they had a lot of guys free agency. They released Dunlap, kind of a cap move. They were able to get him back. They add Carrie Hyder. They brought back Benson Mayowa, who may not be a household name, but he's the guy that gave them 6 sacks last year. And then you're adding, their 2nd-round pick last year, Darrell Taylor, didn't play a snap last year, and he should be healthy now. So I think just the depth, if you go back to their best teams, those 2013, 2014, a real strength of the team was a deep pass rush rotation, and I think they're getting back to that. Other side of the ball, I love the Chris Carson re-signing. I don't think a lot of us thought that was going to happen going into the offseason, just given their cap constraints, and that he was one of the better running backs on the market. So getting him back. Need-wise, I think, they've got some depth and guys they like at cornerback, but there's no clear cut. We don't know yet who the 2 starters are going to be. We talked about Witherspoon. He's definitely a strong contender for a starting job, another 49er. DJ Reed was awesome last year when they brought him in. And they've got Trey Flowers, who's been a starter for them. And then kind of interestingly, they re-signed Demarius Randall and said he's going to be a cornerback now, going back to the position he started his career at after playing safety. So those are kind of the 4 guys that would seem to be competing for jobs, but I could definitely see maybe adding a rookie in there to add to that competition. And then similar to what Keanu was saying about receiver, I mean, we know Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are about as good a duo as you will find, but there's not much proven depth beyond that. They drafted a 6th-round pick, Freddie Swain, who was pretty solid last year, but didn't play a ton. They're kind of their top guy. Behind them, David Moore left in free agency. So getting that solid number 3 guy, whether that's somebody on the roster stepping up or drafting them or signing somebody, that to me is one of the other question marks we have.
Maybe that's in the water. Cardinals drafted 3 wide receivers a couple of years ago. Andy Isabella, 2nd-round pick, even though they took Byron Murphy at the 33rd pick. They draft Hakeem Butler. He's not on the roster. And Keyshawn Johnson and Christian Kirk. He dealt with COVID last year, and I think that really affected him towards the end of the season. So, again, that's why, There's this deep class of wide receiver and quarterback. All right, Keon, I want to ask you. Third overall pick. This is not smokescreen. We're not going to see Jamar Chase going to the Niners. You keep talking about wide receiver. I'm getting a little worried here.
Listen, you never know what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have up their sleeve. I know a lot of people bring up what Kyle Pitts brings to an offense, what he could do with Kyle Shanahan.
Got Kittle. We don't need more tight ends.
Kittle and Pitts, that could be a dynamic duo. I don't know.
You don't give up that many picks to not pick a quarterback.
I know, but
that'd be something though. That'd be a good shocker to start off the draft.
Oh yeah. Right.
Okay, if you had to pick one of the three quarterbacks, let's say Lawrence and Wilson or Ross, put your analyst head on. Who do you think it is? I'm not going to hold you to it, but who do you think it could be between Lance?
When John Lynch calls you, says we're on the clock, who should we take?
Exactly.
And when he calls me, because I'm the one. I've got the intel, you guys, and plus my crystal ball as well. Look, it's a really tough question because they all have different traits. We know that Trey Lance is probably one of the most ideal quarterbacks, and especially because he's groomable. It's a perfect situation to have him sit a year under Jimmy Garoppolo and then allow him to flourish. You look at Justin Fields and how he's a dual threat quarterback and what he can do with his legs. I know that's a lot of a way that the direction that the league is going. And you see a guy like Kyler Murray and what he's able to do, the Lamar Jacksons, the Patrick Mahomes. So it's a very enticing pick there. But then you think about the smarts of Mac Jones, and Kyle Shanahan loves a smart quarterback, and he has all of the makings that makes it seem like that's the direction that they would want to go, but they have their choice. It depends on what kind of situation they want to put themselves in. I wish I could give you an answer. I really don't know, but I am definitely anxious, and I want it to all be over so we can finally figure it out and move on.
I think that's the beauty of the draft. We think we know. We're not the ones making picks. So this is fascinating. And the build-up, I'm really excited. I can't wait for it to unfold.
I was going to say, I think fans would be disappointed to know how often we don't know what's going on within our own teams. I get these questions like, hey, what are the guys? Like, John Schneider is not going to consult with me about this decision, I assure you.
Yeah. We don't know, you guys, I promise.
Not like they give us a tour of the draft room or we see the board. I haven't seen the board in years. And I'll never see it.
I just want to say I stand on this, and I will continue to stand on this NFC West. I love to say it is the toughest division in the NFL. And you look at some of these pieces that are brought in. This is going to be a fun year, you guys. I
don't know if you all are familiar with Danny Kelly at The Ringer, but he always jokes that every good player goes to the NFC West. So it seems to be true. Every splashy trade or big free agent, you're like, how is that happening again?
Well, we got AJ Green from the AFC, JJ Watt, Rodney Hudson, Malcolm Buckler. So maybe he's on this with them.
Seems to be that way. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Let's hope by next year we're all having a normal work environment and back to normal soon.
Great seeing everyone. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Great seeing you all. Thank you.